Florida State versus Alabama in the trenches. Can the Noles generate a pass rush without blitzing?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football recruiting analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today is a fun one for me because I love stats, I love trends, and I love trench play. We're going to combine all three of those throughout the podcast in one way or another, especially at the beginning, where we're going to talk about the Alabama offensive line versus Florida State's front, and in particular, Darrell Jackson, how they're going to try to handle him, a couple of key matchups, and some other possibilities on what Florida State might try to do to create pressure against whichever quarterback it ends up being for the Alabama Crimson Tide. We're also going to talk about returning production or lack thereof, depending on the circumstance, for both Bama and FSU, which players and which groups have a better chance to make a big-time production right off the bat. Both teams have more experience than you might think in some critical areas. We'll get into that. And then to finish up in my countdown for the final segment, I'm going to talk about Kevin Wynn, the true freshman for Florida State. He's a very important player despite being a true freshman. I'll explain why later on in the show. But right now, it's about trench warfare. Florida State must find a way to consistently create havoc up front without blitzing. That's what every defensive coordinator and D-line coach live for, figuring that out. But when Caden Proctor is the opposing team's left tackle, they have one of the best centers and at least a couple other guys that have aspirations of playing in the National Football League conservatively. It is a tall task. To say that Alabama is very talented up front is an understatement, and using some basic stats, going through some different things, looking at Phil Steele, for example, for Alabama, they've got 95 career starts for their projected starters. Of course, things can change in fall camp. That is 32nd in all of college football. But for a team like Bama, that's actually pretty good because they usually have at least one, if not two guys that are entertaining leaving school early. They don't get a lot of fifth-year seniors that start because those guys take off. So you're not necessarily going to have the most starts for a school like Bama, but the talent, the length, the size, the power, all those things are top 5 in the country just about every year. Florida State's got to be able to take that on. But fortunately, the Noles have 3, maybe 4 guys that are going to play just in the trench. That is 295, 300 bare minimum. And a couple of guys, Kevin Wynn, we'll talk about a little later, Daniel Lyons, definitely Darrell Jackson, among others. These are 300-pound plus players. It is going to be an absolute fun matchup to watch because that's power on power, athlete on athlete. So Florida State's up front talent, even though several of these guys, they're transfers, a lot of them, but like Darrell, it's been around. I really think that James Williams, because even though he's a transfer and he came in with the group from Nebraska, it's not the same. He already knows the scheme. Stephon Thompson, the middle linebacker, he knows the scheme. He ran it at Syracuse. He ran it at Nebraska. Now he's at Florida State. Same group. So the transfer stuff is a little bit different for FSU, and I don't think it's going to be as big a deal on defense. Offensively, we'll talk about that in a little bit. That's a bigger deal, and it's a bigger question mark for the Noles. So I think the battle overall will be good. So it's going to come down to a couple of things. Who's going to start for Bama at guard? This is one of the big ones because I was looking at the numbers, and there are a lot of different ways you can grade players, and especially O-line, you want to grade it as a unit. But Jaden Roberts for Bama is a guy that I think that FSU has to win against consistently. He's very talented, but he's also very inconsistent. He's probably going to be the right guard. Now, he may play more than one. It's possible because they've got more than one guy that's capable at that spot, but he's 6'5", 325, so obviously size is not an issue. But here are the games for Roberts last year per Pro Football Focus in his pass protection. The grades are not exactly overwhelming. versus Georgia, 34.7. Versus South Carolina, arguably the best defensive front in college football last year, 40.7. Versus Tennessee, another talented front. They were the best run defense in the country. Decent pass rushers, but better against the run, 59.7. Against LSU, but Tennessee and LSU were both on the road. LSU game, 56.4, and at Oklahoma, 78.5. That's the one game he played well. Like, Oklahoma's front is nasty, and Venables has a lot of different creativity. It's probably the closest in terms of all the creativity that he went up against last year. So good for him in pass pro. The problem is Bama still scored, 3 points? They couldn't run the ball consistently, and they were just inconsistent up front penalties and stupidity, shooting themselves in the foot. He was part of that. So against top competition, Jaden Roberts struggles. So let's talk about Florida State's front here. Do I expect them to run more 4-man or 3-man? Probably a little of both. You're going to see James Williams, a guy that's, again, been in the system for a couple of years at Nebraska before he came over to FSU. He will probably line up at different spots. It's probably not even determined exactly how he's going to be used. He might put his hand in the dirt, play on the strong side a little bit when they go to more of a quote-unquote speed package. One of the linebackers will come down. Maybe they kick somebody inside like DeMonte or maybe Jason Jenkins, whatever. They're going to move a lot of guys around. But again, going back to Jaden Roberts, I expect them to try to get really athletic players on him because he's got a history of being just okay to slightly below average against really athletic fronts. Florida State has its problems coming off last year. D-line talent is not one of them. The defensive front is pretty good, and they've got some experienced linebackers. Elijah Herring played at Tennessee, then played at Memphis, now at Florida State. He's a tackling machine. They might use him as a blitzer, or maybe he's the spy to keep Ty Simpson or whichever quarterback it is in the pocket and come after him. If it's an opportunity where the running back stays in, it's an automatic blitz for most defenses. He's a really sound tackler. He could be the guy that ends up having the biggest game because of all the other players around him. But it's still predicated on the down four, whether it's a stand-up linebacker rushing or just a true down four, because Florida State will play both fronts, getting after them. Roberts is the key, but they can't just rely on beating him. Center's really good for Bama, and I think if I had to pick just one, I would take Caden Proctor as my first-team All-American left tackle. You cannot allow him to dominate. If he does, Bama's winning this game. He has to have at least a few moments where he's, quote-unquote, a regular college football player. Is it James Williams? Is it Darrell Jackson? Is it Daniel Lyons? Is it Jason Jenkins? Somebody has to make a play where they beat Proctor, and it's blatant. Because not only is that a big play, that's a psychological win. The place will go nuts at Doak Campbell if he's the guy that gets beat. Everybody knows who Proctor is. He's quite possibly going to be a top 5 pick next year. He's that good. But at the same time, if Florida State can beat him a few different plays, gives you a chance to win. And obviously, if you beat him, there's a chance to make plays in the backfield, creating a fumble, sack on third down, big plays like that make a difference. When we come back, we're going to talk about the experience factor, Florida State versus Alabama. There's positives and negatives for both teams. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes into play. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals. The price is one thing, but for me, the Game Time app, the best part about it is you go to whatever event you want, baseball game, concert, whatever. You click on a seat and you get to see the view right on your phone to the pitcher's mound, to the stage, or whatever it may be. And you know just how close you are to the action. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEDE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Please hit that like and notification bell and share this podcast. And above all else, comment what your thoughts are on the Alabama-Florida State game, or if you have a question, I am more than happy to discuss. Let's talk a little bit about the experience. Part of this, I'm going to come back to a couple questions with the trenches because the experience for both teams, the way Phil Steele's magazine did it, and just some of my own thoughts combined, it's still going to lead back into the trenches. As I said in the opening, that's going to be the overarching theme today. Number one here, I was surprised because Florida State's got a lot of seniors, both sides of the ball. In Phil Steele's magazine, they didn't have a single player listed as preseason first team ACC. I was a little surprised by that. Maybe Darrell in particular, didn't get one. But at the same time, Bama's got 4 SEC guys with a similar amount of experience. They're 46th in the nation with 11 senior starters, 3 prime reserves that are expected to be starters. Florida State is 40th, 65% or 65.4 is their rank. 12 starters are seniors, 5 key backups. So they're pretty similar. But the bigger thing here is let's just use the defensive side of the ball. For Bama, tackles, 62.4% of their production. 15th in the nation. That's really good for Bama. Florida State is 39th with 55%. It's pretty close in terms of the percentage, but the difference between that little bit is oftentimes the difference between winning and losing. Experienced, to say the least, the 2 inside backers. Lawson in particular, he's really good for Bama. That's a player Florida State's going to have to contend with. Big play defense, meaning sacks, interceptions, plays like that. That's something that Phil Steele tracks. Florida State has 42.2% of its production returning. That's 63rd in college football. While for Bama, again, their big play, Evan Lawson in the middle, is part of this. 14th in the nation, 64.6%. So the guys that were running the defense last year are back, and several of their key defensive front players, they're massive up front. I don't think there's any doubt that Alabama's – I'll go into their whole depth chart in about a week or so. I want to see if there's any injuries or anything first. But barring something unforeseen, they're all really big, and they're just pretty much all juniors, seniors, fifth-year seniors. The key guys will be the players that you would expect. The only question with Bama's front, Quay Russaw, I think, is going to be the starting guy. They call it the wolf position. It's in Florida State's defense. It's the jack. Everybody's got a name for it. He's a key player. He's a kid that, if I remember correctly, he was one of the players out of Montgomery, Pike Road, or he was at Carver, one or the other, I forget. But him and James Smith were at the same school, and they were both really, really good. They both go to Bama. I would imagine that those 2 guys are pretty key. They're somewhat inexperienced, but they were both borderline 5-star defensive line recruits under Saban's staff to go up there to Bama. Those are 2 players, while very talented, Florida State needs to find a way to attack, get them out of position, counters, draws, throwback screens, etc. If you're going to beat ultra-talented players, you got to make their aggressiveness work against them. That's something Florida State should have an advantage with because that's right up Gus Malzahn's alley. He runs a lot of screens. He will run some misdirection early in the game to try to get them to literally think on their feet, to slow them down, make them indecisive, and therefore mitigate their overall production. And I think that's the best way to do it. You can't just run power. You can't just run sweep. You've got to mix it up, run and pass, 3rd and 6, some kind of a draw, 1st down and 5 after a penalty. You may think, oh, Gus is just going to run it. Maybe you take a play action shot. You really have to take advantage of those things. Even though they got a lot of experience, there's a couple guys you can take advantage of. They have to be able to do that. Kind of like with the Roberts kid on offense. Find a guy that you can beat and go after it. Maybe it's somebody else if it's not. Like Smith or Russo are really, really good, but they are more inexperienced than some of the other guys. That's the only reason I'm using them as examples. As for the offensive line, this is not really shocking for Florida State. They're 11th in the nation in terms of total starts with offensive linemen. All 5 of their linemen are seniors, 5th-year seniors that are projected to start. They're 11th in the nation, 129 starts. I know most of those starts aren't at Florida State. Still, that is a lot of football. I would imagine that Pettibone, being the center, who's been through the battles in the ACC, been at Wake Forest, and he's been battling Darrell Jackson every day. He talked about that at his press conference, will pay dividends for the Noles. Really good football player. On the other side, Bama is a little higher than I expected because, again, they have a lot of guys that turn pro early. So they're not always going to have as many returning starts, but they got 95, and that's 32nd in the nation. That's pretty good for a school like Bama that has at least one guy pretty much turn pro at least every other year up front. And they have guys that will leave the program if they don't play because a lot of 5-stars aren't going to wait. 95 is a pretty good amount. Now, a few questions about the trenches and stuff overall that I want to hit on in regards to the production, the experience, and just the matchups. Number one, will Florida State against Bama's line, will they run more 3-man or 4-man, and which one is more likely to be successful? To me, I think it's 3-man if Darrell is truly up to the task and healthy. You got to get through fall camp healthy, because then if they double him, somebody else is coming free. Green dog blitz, doing stunts, doing different things. If Darrell is turned loose and given a one-gap go situation in a zero tech, the talented guy at Bama, I forget his name, but the center is really, really good, probably going to make it to the NFL. That's as good a matchup as we'll see this year in college football, one-on-one. But Darrell has to be able to win some of those matchups and create havoc, and this is his money game. He knows that if he's going to get drafted, especially high, he must play well against Bama. Darrell knows that. So that's very key. I would like to see him in a lot of zero tech or just a zero shade and let him go. I know there are different ways you can run a 3-man line, whether it's a 1-gap or 2-gap. I expect to see both, but I think the 3-man is more effective, especially if James is ready to be turned up as a stand-up blitzer. I don't care if it's against Proctor or the other guy. If they have to focus on him, your blitzes and your stunts are going to be more impactful. Just saying. Number 2, Roberts versus Darrell Jackson. If it happens, Darrell has to win a lot of these, and it has to be dominant. Just straight up, there's a reason that I brought him up. He grades the lowest in key situations in pass pro. Darrell, whether he's playing 2-eye or he's stunting, whatever it is, he has to be able to win that matchup, must get negative plays. And then third, just James Williams in general, as I brought up earlier in the show, is Florida State going to be able to use him? He's, for those that don't know, he's like 6'4", 6'5", 260, just over. Are they going to be able to use him across the line and be comfortable with it? Jason Jenkins is another guy that's very twitchy, very athletic, 6'5", 6'6", 270, 280. But I think it's Williams, not just like occasionally dropping him into coverage to throw him off. Are they going to put his hand in the dirt and try to put him in a situation where Wilkin Formby, the right tackle, he's only like a redshirt sophomore, really big guy, is he going to be able to handle him? And is it also a situation where Jenkins or somebody else, just to throw it in, can make some plays? Those are a couple of the key matchups that Florida State has to win if they have a chance to beat Bama. And if they don't win those matchups in the trenches like that consistently, I don't think you're going to beat them because they've got so many good skill players, Ryan Williams, etc. Beating Bama starts in the trenches, even though they've got NFL talent. You have to make it manageable for your offense, obviously the offensive line, which I'll talk about more this weekend against Bama's front. But you have to win those matchups, especially 1st and 10 with Gus's run-first offense. But as I've talked about throughout today, you got to beat Roberts, you got to beat Formby, one-on-one in pass rushing situations without blitzing. Occasionally they'll stun or blitz, but you got to be able to drop 7 and make Ty Simpson feel uncomfortable. If he does not, it will be very difficult to beat them. Their wide receiver group is elite. They have to be under pressure because those guys are going to get open against anybody, even though Florida State's got a lot of DB talent and it's probably underrated, in my opinion. You're not going to stay in front of Ryan Williams for that long. You have to be able to get pressure on Ty Simpson. When we come back, going to continue with the D-line theme, but a player that a lot of Bama fans that might be watching this aren't going to know a lot about, and even some Florida State fans may not know too much either. That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether it's workouts, long days, or on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is a doctor-developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration. He uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. Whatever your favorite flavor is, I like grape and I like raspberry. They've got something for you. Drip Drop is a very well-balanced group in terms of different flavors that you can use. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On customers 20% off your first order. Just head over to dripdrop.com to use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thank you once again for checking out Locked On Seminoles as we get one day closer to Florida State hosting Alabama in Doak Campbell Stadium. I'm really looking forward to the game, and we're going to break down this contest from every possible angle imaginable. D-line, O-line, O-line, D-line, special teams, quarterback play, third downs, red zone, formations, you name it. This podcast in some way, shape, or form is going to find a way to bring you insights you're probably not going to find too many other places. I love stats, I love trends, and I love to study film. This is my bag. Now, let's talk a little bit about another key player as I started what I call the top 22 for Florida State. Key players that have to make an impact this season, and in particular with this game, for Florida State to come out on top. You can look at it from a different perspective if you wanted to say, who are Florida State's 22 best players? That's not what this is. Yesterday, I looked at it from a little bit different perspective too, because I talked about LaWayne McCoy. I don't think LaWayne will start right away, and he may not be a starter overall this season, but he will be a key contributor because he's a deep threat. He's got incredible hands, and he's a guy that's from Florida. It means something to him to play at Florida State. So it's not just talent, it's all the intangibles. And this next guy that I'm going to talk about for number 21 on the list, there's a lot of that involved too, and he's a Georgia kid. That's the other state that FSU has always recruited well. Kevin Wynn, true freshman, defensive tackle out of Georgia, played 1A football, but just dominated, went to the All-American game in San Antonio. They took him out of some of the drills, literally, because he was dominating so much. The offense was not having a very good time of just putting their install in. He is a special player. 6'2", 340, plays hard every snap. I scouted him not only in terms of watching his film, but spoke to somebody that had coached against him, and he said, no doubt. We've won against everybody. He's the best defensive tackle in Georgia. Justice Terry included, a kid who went to Texas. He said, Kevin Wynn's the best guy. There's no doubt about it. He doesn't quit. He goes hard on every play. At 340 pounds, he's already looked really good in Florida State drills, the videos that were out. But he's a guy that has the ability to rotate in, even if it's just 15, 20 plays against Bama. I wouldn't be surprised if he got quite a bit of run. You need size against Bama. You've got to have size against them, or they're just going to run inside zone, a few gap plays, maybe a quarterback counter here or there just to mix it up, a little RPO. It'll be so generic it's not funny. But again, left tackle, NFL player, no question. Center, probably an NFL player. The right side's a little iffy, but the left guard's also pretty good. But if you've got just two guys up front that are NFL linemen, if you allow them to, they're going to bury you. And you're not going to display Darrell Jackson every play. He has to get off the field, especially, let's be honest, August 30th is going to be very hot in Tallahassee. That's going to be a slight edge for the Noles, but a lot of the kids for Bama are used to playing in the heat too. It's not quite as hot in Tuscaloosa as it is in Tallahassee, but they've got more depth overall. That's why it's more important for Kevin to be ready than it is for some of the Bama freshmen. They're a deeper team than FSU. That's not really in question. If Kevin Wynn comes in, he can just hold his own, whether they're going with a three-man front, and he could play zero tech. He's that rare guy that has the power, the initiative, and just the God-given ability to move despite his size laterally really well. He could be somebody that makes some plays. He may only play 10 reps against Bama. I don't know, but they will be very important. The interior D-line for FSU can't just be slightly above average in this game. Whether it's Darrell in there, whether it's Daniel Lyons, whether it's anybody else, I don't know exactly how they're going to do it. They may play Jason Jenkins in there a little bit because of his height on third and long. I could see him being in the middle because he's like 6'5", 6'6". There's a lot of different ways to look at it. Kevin Wynn's part of that equation as well. And especially for the length of the season, as we get to games 5, 6, 7, 8, Wynn should be in the rotation consistently every game. He's a very physically gifted young man. And he could be another 3-and-out kind of player. He's so talented, it's not even funny. And unlike a lot of kids that have Wynn's physical gifts, his mental edge is what I've been told is the biggest thing that he has. He wants it. He enjoys to practice. He enjoys to grind. He's the guy that will chase down a screen from nose guard. There aren't many guys that want to do that weigh 340. Wynn's a different kind of cat, and I think he's the kind of player that Florida State can use early, even against Bama, to help spell them. And they've got a pretty darn good group of defensive linemen, but the depth, there aren't many guys built like Wynn. He's not as tall as Darrell, but he's actually slightly wider, as crazy as that may be. He's going to play some, and I think he is a very important player for Florida State against Alabama. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Please hit that like and subscribe, share this podcast, and comment. We will see you again soon here on Locked On Seminoles.